At my daughter's wedding, her husband introduced me to his wealthy parents, saying, "This is the annoying beggar we have to put up with." Everyone laughed, enjoying the humiliation, but the contrast between my modest appearance and reality was revealed when his mother exclaimed, "Aren't you the mysterious billionaire who bought our company?" You won't believe what happened next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The front door burst open with such force that my reading glasses nearly slipped off my nose. Emily practically flew into the living room, her teacher's cardigan askew, cheeks flushed pink from the March evening air. "Dad, I'm engaged. Justin proposed." She thrust her left hand toward me, a modest diamond catching the warm glow of my table lamp. The ring trembled slightly. Her excitement was that intense. I set down my newspaper, the evening crossword forgotten, and rose from my worn leather chair. "Emily, sweetheart!" I pulled her into an embrace, feeling her practically vibrate with joy. "When did this happen?" "Tonight. Right after school, he picked me up and drove to Miller Park. He got down on one knee right by the old oak tree where we had our first picnic." Her words tumbled over each other. "Dad, I'm so happy I could burst." I held her at arm's length, studying her radiant face. 28 years old, and she still looked like the little girl who used to bring me dandelions from the backyard. Catherine's eyes, Catherine's smile. "Show me his picture," I said, settling back into my chair as Emily fumbled for her phone. She scrolled through her screen, fingers dancing across the glass. "Here, this is from his Facebook. Isn't he handsome?" I adjusted my glasses and took the phone. The young man staring back at me had perfectly styled brown hair, a confident smile, and wore what looked like an expensive suit. But it wasn't his appearance that made my stomach clench. It was the name beneath the photo, Justin Whitmore. My weathered hands tightened around the phone. The Whitmores. I knew that family name all too well from my business dealings, though Emily had no idea about my corporate empire. To her, I was just Dad, a retired nobody living on Social Security in a modest two-story house. "Emily," I began carefully, my voice losing its earlier warmth, "are you sure about your choice? This family?" Her smile faltered. "What do you mean?" I stared at the screen, memories flooding back. The Whitmore corruption scandal 3 years ago. Their son's drunk driving incident that mysteriously disappeared from court records. Margaret Whitmore's affair with her business partner that destroyed 2 marriages. The Whitmores have a reputation in this town. Business ethics, personal behavior. There have been scandals. Emily snatched the phone from my hands, her expression shifting from confusion to hurt. "How can you say that without even knowing him?" "Sweetheart, I'm just concerned." "Concerned about what? That someone actually wants to marry your daughter?" Her voice rose, something I'd rarely heard in our 28 years together. "Justin loves me, Dad. He chose me, a simple elementary school teacher, over all the wealthy women his mother keeps throwing at him." I stood again, reaching toward her. "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" She stepped back, clutching the phone to her chest like a shield. "You looked at one picture and decided he's not good enough? You don't know him at all." The hurt in her voice cut deeper than any business rival's betrayal ever had. But the investigative reports I'd read about the Whitmore family painted a disturbing picture of privilege without accountability, wealth without morals. "Emily, please, sit down. Let's talk about this rationally." "Rationally?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want to talk rationally about love? About the first man who's ever looked at me like I'm precious?" "You are precious. Not precious enough for you to be happy about my engagement, apparently." Tears gathered in her eyes, making them shine like Catherine's used to when she was angry. "I came here thinking you'd celebrate with me. I thought my father would be thrilled that his daughter found happiness." I watched helplessly as she grabbed her purse from the coffee table, her movements sharp with wounded anger. Every instinct screamed at me to apologize, to take back my words, but the business reports haunted me. The Whitmores destroyed everything they touched. "Emily, wait." "No, Dad. I thought you'd be happy for me, but you only know how to ruin everything." Her footsteps echoed toward the front door, each one feeling like a nail in the coffin of our relationship. I stood frozen in my living room, still holding the silence where her laughter had been just moments before. The front door slammed with a finality that seemed to shake the entire house. I winced, still standing in the middle of my living room like a statue, listening to Emily's car engine roar to life in my driveway. The sound faded down Maple Street, leaving behind only the tick of my old mantel clock and the distant hum of evening traffic. I sank into my chair, feeling every one of my 68 years settle into my bones. The newspaper lay crumpled where I'd dropped it, the crossword puzzle mocking me with its half-filled squares. 7 across. Father's mistake. 6 letters. I could think of several answers, none of them suitable for a family publication. My gaze drifted to the mantel, where Catherine's photograph smiled down at me from our wedding day. Her white dress flowing like silk, her eyes bright with the kind of joy I'd just watched Emily experience, and then watched myself destroy with my clumsy words. I pulled myself from the chair and walked to the mantel, lifting the silver frame with careful hands. The glass was cool against my fingertips, polished to perfection because I cleaned it every Sunday morning after reading the paper. "What would you have done, Cat?" I whispered to her image. "Would you have kept quiet?" But I knew the answer. Catherine would have invited Justin for dinner, asked gentle questions, observed with those keen eyes of hers. She wouldn't have ambushed Emily with concerns based on newspaper reports and corporate gossip. She would have given the boy a chance to prove himself, or hang himself. I traced the edge of the frame, remembering Catherine's voice from countless parenting discussions over the years. "William, you can't protect her from everything. Sometimes you have to let her make mistakes, and be there to catch her if she falls." But what if this wasn't just a mistake? What if this was a catastrophe that would destroy my daughter's sweet, trusting nature? Emily saw good in everyone. It's what made her such a wonderful teacher, such a loving daughter. But it also made her vulnerable to people like the Whitmores, who viewed kindness as weakness to exploit. The house felt enormous around me, every shadow deeper, every creak louder. I'd lived alone here for 7 years since Catherine passed, but tonight the solitude pressed against me like a living thing. Emily usually called every other evening, her cheerful chatter filling the empty spaces. Now, because of my failure as a father, that lifeline was severed. I returned to my chair, Catherine's photograph still in my hands. The leather cushions seemed to swallow me, and I wondered if this was how it would be from now on, sitting alone while my daughter built a life with people who might destroy her. "Maybe I'm wrong," I said aloud, my voice echoing strangely in the quiet room. "Maybe Justin Whitmore is different from his family. Maybe love really can change people." But 30 years of business dealings had taught me that people rarely strayed far from their roots. The Whitmores were users, manipulators, destroyers of anything that didn't serve their immediate interests. And Emily, with her teacher's salary and generous heart, had nothing they could want, except unless Justin genuinely loved her, unless he was the exception to his family's pattern. I studied Catherine's face in the photograph, searching for guidance in those familiar features. She'd always been the wise one, the patient one. I was the protector, the provider, the one who worried about dangers she never even considered. "I spoke from fear, didn't I?" I asked her image. "Not from love." The clock chimed 9 times, each note hanging in the air before fading into silence. Emily was probably at Justin's apartment by now, crying on his shoulder about her terrible father. He'd comfort her, tell her he understood, maybe even suggest they skip family dinners in the future. Anything to drive a wedge between us. Or maybe he'd encourage her to reconcile with me, prove he was bigger than my suspicions. I needed to know which kind of man my daughter was marrying. I needed to give him a chance to show his true character, not as Emily's fiancé, but as himself, when he thought no one important was watching. My fingers drummed against the arm of my chair as a plan began forming. It was risky, maybe even foolish, but it might be the only way to protect Emily without losing her forever. I reached for the cordless phone on the side table, Emily's number programmed into the speed dial. My thumb hovered over the button. One call could start the process of healing between us, or it could make everything worse, but doing nothing would definitely make everything worse. Morning sunlight streamed through my checkered kitchen curtains, casting geometric patterns across the small dining table where I sat, nursing my 3rd cup of coffee. The newspaper lay folded beside my elbow, untouched. I'd been awake since 4:30, rehearsing apologies and planning strategies until my head buzzed with exhaustion and caffeine. The cordless phone sat before me like an unexploded bomb. I'd picked it up 7 times in the past hour, punched in Emily's number, then hung up before the first ring. Each time, my courage deserted me at the last second. I scratched my chin, a nervous habit Catherine used to tease me about, and checked the kitchen clock again. 9:15. Emily would be in her classroom by now, probably setting up for the day's lessons. She always arrived early to arrange art supplies or practice reading stories aloud. Would she even answer a call from me? My thumb found the speed dial button and pressed before I could lose my nerve again. 1 ring. 2. 3. Hello? Her voice was cautious, guarded in a way that made my chest tighten. Emily. I cleared my throat, surprised by how hoarse I sounded. Sweetheart, I need to apologize. Silence stretched between us, filled only by the distant chatter of children in her classroom background. Dad? The wariness softened slightly. I have to start teaching in 10 minutes. Then I'll be quick. I was wrong last night. Not about my concerns, but about how I expressed them. You deserved celebration, not interrogation. I heard her chair squeak. She was leaning back, probably closing her eyes the way she did when processing difficult emotions. You hurt me, Dad. Deeply. I know, and I'm sorry. I stood, began pacing the small kitchen. Emily, I want to make this right. Will you and Justin come for dinner this weekend? I'd like to get to know him properly. The silence stretched so long, I wondered if the call had dropped. Really? Her voice brightened, hope creeping in despite her caution. You'll invite us for dinner? Yes, Saturday night, if that works for you both. I'll cook pot roast. Remember how your mother used to make it? Oh, Dad. I could hear tears in her voice now, but good ones. Relief and forgiveness mixing together. I was so afraid we'd ruined everything. Never, sweetheart. You're my daughter, my only family. I paused by the window, watching a neighbor walk his dog down the sidewalk. Just one condition about dinner. What? I chose my words carefully, knowing this was the crucial moment. Don't tell Justin about my business affairs. Let him know me simply as your father, an ordinary man who wants to meet his daughter's fiancé. Your business affairs? Confusion colored her tone. Dad, what business affairs? You're retired. Perfect. Emily truly had no idea about my corporate empire, my billions in assets, my influence across 3 states. To her, I was exactly what I appeared to be, a modest retiree living on Social Security. I prefer to keep my financial situation private until I know someone better. Old habits, you understand. That's kind of strange, Dad. But if it's important to you, it is very important. Okay. She laughed, and the sound was like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. I'm sure Justin will love you. He's wonderful with older people. He volunteers at the nursing home every month. My eyebrows rose. That detail hadn't appeared in any of the reports I'd read about him. Interesting. That sounds very charitable of him. He is charitable and kind and funny. Dad, once you get to know him, you'll see why I fell in love with him. I hoped she was right, for both our sakes. Where would you like to meet? I could make reservations somewhere nice. Actually, could we eat here? At your house? Emily's voice grew warm with memory. I'd love to see Justin in the place where I grew up. And your pot roast is so much better than any restaurant. Of course. Saturday at 6? Perfect. Oh, Dad, thank you. This means everything to me. After she hung up, I remained in the kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. Phase 1 of my plan was complete. Saturday night, I would meet Justin Whitmore, not as William Stone, billionaire businessman, but as Emily's ordinary father. I walked to my bedroom and opened the closet, scanning my clothes with new eyes. Most of my wardrobe consisted of expensive suits and Italian leather shoes, the armor of a successful executive. But buried in the back were older items, faded jeans, simple button-down shirts, a cardigan Catherine had knitted me 15 years ago. For Saturday night, I needed to look the part of a man living on a modest pension. A man whose approval might be nice to have but wasn't necessary for success. A man whose daughter's happiness was his only leverage. I pulled out the cardigan, holding it up to the light. It smelled faintly of Catherine's perfume. Even after all these years, she would have understood my plan, I thought. She would have seen the wisdom in testing a man's character when he believed himself unobserved by anyone who mattered. Justin Whitmore was about to meet Emily's father, but which version of himself would he choose to reveal? I folded the cardigan carefully and placed it on my bed. Saturday couldn't come soon enough. 2 outfits lay spread across my bed, like competing versions of myself. On the left, a charcoal wool suit, Italian leather shoes, and my platinum Rolex, the armor of William Stone, billionaire. On the right, faded jeans with a small tear near the pocket, a threadbare button-down shirt missing its top button, and scuffed work boots I'd owned for 15 years. I picked up the expensive watch first, feeling its familiar weight against my palm. $20,000 of Swiss precision, gifted to myself after my first $1 million deal. Tonight, it would stay locked away. Walking to my bedroom safe, hidden behind Catherine's landscape painting, I punched in the code. The heavy door swung open, revealing stacks of documents, jewelry, and investment portfolios worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. I placed the Rolex inside next to Catherine's diamond necklace and closed the safe with a soft click. "Let's see what kind of person you really are, Justin Whitmore," I murmured to my reflection. The worn clothing felt strange against my skin. The cotton shirt, softened by countless washings, hung loose around my shoulders. These were the clothes I wore for yard work, for fixing the kitchen sink, for moments when no one important was watching. Tonight, they would be my disguise. I studied myself in the dresser mirror, running fingers through my gray hair to make it less polished. The man staring back looked every inch the struggling retiree. Weathered hands, tired eyes, clothes that spoke of careful budgeting and hard choices. Perfect. My reflection reminded me of my own father in his later years, proud but worn down by financial struggles. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd built an empire to avoid his fate, yet here I was, deliberately mimicking it. Catherine's photograph watched from the nightstand. I touched the frame gently. "You always said character reveals itself under pressure, Cat. Tonight, I'll create that pressure." From my wallet, I removed all but $20 in cash, tucking the credit cards into the safe beside my watch. A man on Social Security wouldn't carry platinum cards or thick rolls of bills. Every detail mattered. My closet held 2 sets of car keys. The Mercedes and BMW keys went into the safe's drawer. I selected the keys to my 10-year-old Toyota Camry. Reliable, invisible, unremarkable. The kind of car a retired man would drive until it died. In the garage, I paused between my vehicles. The luxury cars sat covered by tarps, hidden from Emily's view for years. She believed I owned only the Camry, that I'd sold my good car after Catherine's medical bills. Another carefully constructed lie to protect my secret. The Camry's interior smelled like old coffee and worn vinyl. I adjusted the rearview mirror, catching another glimpse of my transformed appearance. Even I had trouble recognizing the billionaire beneath this ordinary exterior. The drive to Bella Vista took 15 minutes through Bloomington's quiet streets. I'd chosen this restaurant carefully, nice enough to make Emily happy, modest enough to fit my cover story. Not the kind of place Justin Whitmore would normally frequent, but exactly where a teacher would take her retired father for a special dinner. I parked near the back of the lot, avoiding the spaces closest to the entrance. Wealthy men expected convenient parking. Poor men took what they could get. Through the restaurant's windows, I spotted Emily's distinctive red hair. She sat across from a young man in what looked like an expensive suit, his posture radiating confidence and privilege. Justin Whitmore, in the flesh. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. This was it, the moment of truth. Everything I'd learned about the Whitmores from corporate reports would either be confirmed or disproven by the next few hours. I checked my appearance one final time in the mirror, practiced my tired smile, and stepped out of the Camry. The evening air carried the scent of approaching rain. Walking toward the restaurant entrance, I felt the weight of deception settle around me like a cloak. For the next few hours, I wouldn't be William Stone, business magnate. I would be Emily's ordinary father, a man whose approval meant nothing to ambitious young men from wealthy families. The glass door reflected my transformed image as I reached for the handle. Inside, Emily waved excitedly from their corner table, her face bright with anticipation. Justin looked up from his phone, and I watched his eyes assess me from head to toe in the span of a heartbeat. "Dad!" Emily bounced up from her chair, her enthusiasm lighting up the corner of Bella Vista's dining room. "You made it!" She hugged me tightly, and I caught the faint scent of her lavender perfume, the same one Catherine used to wear. Over her shoulder, I watched Justin rise slowly from his seat, his expression carefully neutral as he took in my appearance. "Emily, darling," I kissed her forehead, then turned to face the young man who wanted to marry my daughter. "You must be Justin." He extended his hand with visible reluctance, his grip lasting exactly 2 seconds, long enough to be polite, brief enough to show discomfort. His palm was soft, manicured, the hand of someone who'd never done manual labor. "Mr. Stone, Emily's told me so much about you." His tone carried the particular politeness wealthy people used with service workers, courteous but dismissive. I'd heard it countless times in business meetings, usually directed at waiters or janitors. "All good things, I hope." I settled into the chair across from him, noting how he'd positioned himself with his back to the wall, surveying the room like a prince holding court. The restaurant buzzed with quiet conversation and clinking silverware. Middle-class families celebrating anniversaries, young couples on date nights, retired teachers like Emily stretching their budgets for special occasions. Justin looked profoundly out of place among them. "So, Mr. Stone, Emily mentioned you're retired?" He leaned back in his chair, fingers drumming against the white tablecloth. "What did you do before?" "Various things. Maintenance work, mostly. Nothing too exciting." His eyebrows rose slightly, and I caught him glancing at my frayed shirt collar. "Maintenance. Right." Emily jumped in quickly, sensing tension. "Dad's being modest. He worked really hard to support our family." "I'm sure he did." Justin picked up his menu, gold cufflinks catching the restaurant's soft lighting. "Have you decided what you're ordering?" "I'm thinking the seafood tower. It's only $85, but life's too short for cheap food, right?" I opened my own menu, scanning the prices with the careful attention of a man counting every dollar. "The chicken looks good. Reasonable price, too." "Chicken's fine, I suppose." He snapped his fingers at a passing waiter. "Excuse me. We're ready to order." The server, a college-age girl with tired eyes, approached our table with professional patience. Justin rattled off his expensive selections: appetizer, wine, the seafood tower, while I ordered the $12 chicken plate and water. "Just water?" Justin's voice carried mock concern. "Come on, Mr. Stone, let me buy you a beer. Emily's father deserves better than tap water." The condescension in his tone made my jaw clench, but I maintained my gentle smile. "Water's fine, son. I don't drink much anymore." "Fair enough. Budget considerations, I understand." He leaned forward conspiratorially. "Don't worry about Emily's future, though. She'll never have to worry about money again once we're married." Emily's face reddened. "Justin, what? It's true." He reached across the table to squeeze her hand, his Rolex prominently displayed. "I can give you everything your father couldn't. Travel, nice clothes, a house in the right neighborhood." My weathered hands remained steady on the table, but underneath, my fists were slowly clenching. The casual cruelty of his words, the assumption that my daughter had been deprived, the smug certainty that money solved everything, it all confirmed my worst suspicions about the Whitmore family. "Emily's had a good life," I said quietly. "Oh, I'm sure she has. But there's good, and then there's great, you know." He gestured around the modest restaurant. "Like this place. It's fine for what it is, but wait until you see where I take Emily for our anniversary dinners." The server returned with Justin's wine, a $20 glass of something French that he swirled pretentiously before tasting. "Perfect. You can't get quality like this at home, Mr. Stone. Emily's probably never experienced real wine before." "Actually," Emily interjected, her voice strained, "Dad taught me to appreciate simple pleasures. We don't need expensive things to be happy." Justin laughed, a sound devoid of genuine humor. "That's sweet, honey, but you say that because you've never had access to the finer things. Trust me, once you experience real luxury, you'll never want to go back to—" He gestured vaguely at my clothes. "Well, to this." I took a slow sip of water, using the moment to study this young man who claimed to love my daughter. Everything about him screamed entitlement, from his perfectly styled hair to his Italian leather shoes. But it wasn't his wealth that bothered me. It was his assumption that money made him superior to everyone around him. "Tell me about your work, Justin," I said, keeping my voice level. Work? He laughed again. Well, I'm technically in the family business, but honestly, it runs itself. My real passion is travel. I just got back from Monaco last month. Amazing place, though I doubt you've been. Emily shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Justin enjoys exploring different cultures. Cultures, casinos, yacht clubs, all the same thing, really. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through what appeared to be vacation photos. Look at this view from my hotel balcony. 2,000 a night, but worth every penny. I watched Emily's face grow more troubled as Justin continued his boastful monologue. This wasn't the loving, humble man she'd described. This was exactly what I'd feared. A spoiled child who viewed my daughter as another acquisition. The food arrived, and Justin's seafood tower dominated our small table like a monument to excess. He dove in enthusiastically, lobster juice dripping down his chin as he continued talking about his various indulgences. My chicken was perfectly adequate, though I found myself losing appetite as the evening progressed. Each word from Justin's mouth confirmed what I'd suspected about his character, but seeing Emily's growing discomfort made the victory feel hollow. You know what, Mr. Stone? Justin pointed his lobster fork at me between bites. I respect what you've done. Raising Emily on limited means, it must have been challenging. But that's all behind us now, Justin continued, oblivious to the storm gathering in Emily's eyes. I'm going to give her a life she never even dreamed of. Vacations in Europe, designer clothes, maybe a nice house in the suburbs where she won't have to worry about property taxes. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his car keys, setting them deliberately on the table. The BMW logo gleamed under the restaurant's lights like a trophy. See these? Brand new MFIF. Cost more than most people make in a year, but Emily deserves to ride in style. He grinned at me with the confidence of someone who'd never been challenged. I know you want the best for your daughter, Mr. Stone. Well, I am the best. My water glass trembled slightly in my grip. Across the table, Emily had gone pale, her embarrassment radiating like heat. Justin, please, she whispered, glancing around at nearby tables where other diners were beginning to stare. What? I'm being honest. He draped his arm possessively around Emily's shoulders. Your father understands that a man provides for his family. He wasn't in a position to provide much, were you, Mr. Stone? The question hung in the air like a challenge. I set down my water glass with careful precision, watching condensation pool around its base. I provided what I could, I said quietly. Of course you did, and now it's my turn. He leaned back in his chair, satisfied with his own generosity. Emily won't have to clip coupons or shop at discount stores anymore. She can finally live the way she was meant to. Emily pulled away from his embrace, her teacher's voice sharp with controlled anger. I never complained about how we lived, because you didn't know any better, sweetheart. But trust me, once you experience real comfort. He gestured toward his expensive watch, making sure I noticed. This Rolex? Anniversary gift to myself? 25 grand, but a man has to reward success. 25,000? I'd paid less for my own Rolex, the one currently locked in my bedroom safe. The irony would have been amusing if his arrogance wasn't so suffocating. You know what I think, Mr. Stone. Justin leaned forward conspiratorially, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. I think you should be grateful. Your daughter could have ended up with some nobody, some teacher or office worker living paycheck to paycheck. Instead, she's marrying into the Whitmore family. The name dropped from his lips like a benediction, as if I should recognize its importance and bow accordingly. The Whitmore family owns half the commercial real estate downtown. My mother just closed a deal worth $12 million. He pulled out his platinum credit card, setting it beside the car keys like weapons in an arsenal. When Emily and I get married, she'll never want for anything. Emily's hands clenched in her lap, knuckles white with tension. Money isn't everything, Justin. Says someone who's never had it. He laughed dismissively. Look, honey, I love your idealism, but let's be realistic. Your father did his best with what he had. He gestured vaguely at my worn clothes. But now you can have everything you deserve. Under the table, my own hands had formed fists. Every word from this spoiled child's mouth confirmed my worst fears about his character. He didn't love Emily. He collected her. She was another trophy to display, proof of his benevolence in rescuing a poor teacher from her modest circumstances. The other restaurant patrons were openly staring now, drawn by Justin's increasingly loud declarations of wealth. An elderly couple at the next table shook their heads disapprovingly. A young family gathered their children closer, clearly uncomfortable with the vulgar display. "You understand, don't you, Mr. Stone?" Justin's voice carried across the restaurant like a sermon. "Emily's beauty, her kindness. She deserves better than struggling to make ends meet. I can give her the world." I studied his face, seeing nothing but entitled smugness, where there should have been love and respect. This wasn't a man discussing his future wife. This was a collector showing off his latest acquisition. "I need to leave now," I said quietly, pushing back from the table. Justin's fork paused halfway to his mouth, confusion flickering across his features. "Leave? But we haven't finished dinner." "I have." I stood slowly, maintaining the careful dignity of a man with little left but his pride. "Thank you for the meal. But—" He gestured at his seafood tower, at the expensive wine, at the platinum card still gleaming on the white tablecloth. "I'm buying dinner. The least you could do is stay and appreciate the gesture." Emily rose as well, her face flushed with mortification. "Dad, wait. I'm so sorry." "Don't apologize for me, Emily." I looked directly at Justin, who stared back with the bewildered expression of someone who'd never been dismissed by a lesser person. "I've learned everything I needed to know tonight." "Everything about what?" Justin's voice carried a note of indignation. "I've been nothing but generous, nothing but honest about what I can offer Emily." I picked up my jacket from the chair back, feeling the weight of every patron's gaze. The restaurant had gone quiet, except for the soft jazz playing through overhead speakers and the distant clatter of dishes from the kitchen. "Good night, Emily." "Good night, Justin." I walked toward the exit with measured steps, neither hurrying nor looking back. Behind me, I heard Emily's voice, tight with embarrassment and confusion. "Dad, please." But I was already pushing through the glass doors, stepping into the evening air where rain had begun to fall in light drops. The parking lot stretched before me, my modest Camry waiting in the shadows, while luxury vehicles gleamed under the restaurant's lights. I'd gotten exactly what I'd come for, confirmation that Justin Whitmore was everything I'd feared, and worse. The key turned in my front door lock with a familiar click, and I stepped into the darkness of my modest home. The silence hit me like a physical force after the restaurant's clatter and Justin's booming voice. Only the distant hum of my refrigerator and the tick of Catherine's old mantel clock filled the space. I hung my coat on the wooden peg by the door, the same peg I'd used for 15 years. My fingers fumbled with the light switch, and warm yellow light flooded the living room. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it hours ago, yet somehow the space felt different, smaller, more honest than the performance I'd just endured. The threadbare shirt clung to my shoulders with uncomfortable dampness. I needed to change, to shed this costume of poverty I'd worn like armor. Climbing the stairs to my bedroom, each step creaked with the weight of what I'd learned about my daughter's future husband. In my bedroom, I peeled off the worn clothes and folded them carefully. They'd served their purpose, revealed Justin's true nature with surgical precision. I pulled on comfortable pajamas and my old robe, the one Catherine had given me for our 20th anniversary. The kitchen called to me. I filled my electric kettle, the mundane task of making tea offering a familiar ritual to calm my churning thoughts. While water heated, I stared out the window at Maple Street's quiet evening tableau. Porch lights glowed like warm beacons. Families settled into their evening routines, completely unaware of the drama that had unfolded at Bella Vista. Steam rose from my cup as I carried the chamomile tea to my reading chair. The leather had molded to my body over the years, supporting me through countless evenings of solitude. Tonight, it felt like a confessional booth. "Emily is an adult," I whispered to the empty room. "Maybe she sees something in him that I missed." But even as I spoke the words, I knew they were false comfort. Justin Whitmore had revealed himself completely tonight. His arrogance, his casual cruelty, his view of my daughter as a trophy to be acquired, rather than a partner to be cherished. Catherine's photograph watched me from the mantel, her wedding smile frozen in silver-framed eternity. I rose and brought it back to my chair, holding her image in my weathered hands. "What would you do, Cat? How do you protect someone who doesn't want protection?" Her silence felt heavier than usual. In life, Catherine would have found some gentle way to guide Emily toward the truth. She possessed a gift for asking questions that led people to their own revelations. I'd always been the blunt instrument. She was the surgeon's scalpel. Outside, a car door slammed. Through my window, I watched the Hendersons return from their own evening out, laughing together as they walked to their front door. 43 years of marriage, and they still held hands on their driveway. That was what Emily deserved. Partnership, respect, genuine affection. My tea grew cold as I wrestled with impossible choices. I could confront Emily directly, tell her what I'd witnessed tonight. But she'd already defended Justin once, chosen him over her father's concerns. Would she listen now, or would my interference drive her further into his arms? I could confront Justin himself, drop my facade, and reveal the billionaire behind the broken-down retiree act. The shock might humble him temporarily, but men like Justin didn't change. They just became more careful about hiding their true nature. Or I could stay silent, watch my beloved daughter marry a man who would slowly chip away at her confidence, her joy, her beautiful spirit. Stand by while Justin Whitmore transformed my bright, generous Emily into another trophy wife, isolated from her modest roots and dependent on his largesse. The clock chimed 11 times. Hours had passed since I'd left the restaurant, and I was no closer to a solution. Catherine's face smiled up at me from the photograph, eternally young and wise. She has to learn for herself, doesn't she? I asked her image. If I interfere, she'll never forgive me. If I don't... The sentence hung unfinished in the quiet room. Through my window, the Henderson house had gone dark, except for a single upstairs light. They were probably reading in bed together, sharing the comfortable intimacy of a lifetime partnership. I pressed my lips to Catherine's photograph, tasting glass and longing. Help her find her way, love. Help her see what I can't show her. Rising from my chair, I carried the frame back to its place of honor on the mantel. The decision crystallized as I set it down. I would not interfere. Emily had chosen her path, and I would trust in her intelligence and strength to recognize the truth when it became undeniable. But watching from the sidelines while my daughter walked into what I feared would be years of subtle emotional abuse would be the hardest thing I'd ever done. 5 months passed like a slow-moving storm. Spring melted into summer. Summer faded to early autumn. And through it all, wedding preparations consumed Emily's life. I kept my promise to myself. No interference, no warnings, no attempts to change her mind. But watching my daughter plan her future with Justin Whitmore felt like watching someone unknowingly walk toward quicksand. The wedding invitation arrived in August, an elaborate affair with gold embossing and heavy cardstock that probably cost more than some people's monthly grocery bill. It sat now on my bedroom dresser like an elegant death warrant, catching September's early morning light. Dawn had broken over Bloomington an hour ago, but I'd been awake since 4, staring at the ceiling and dreading this day. Emily's wedding day. What should have been pure joy for any father instead felt like watching a beloved ship sail toward hidden rocks. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and shuffled to the bathroom. My reflection in the mirror showed every one of my 68 years. Gray stubble, tired eyes, the weight of secrets carved into the lines around my mouth. Today I would smile and celebrate while my heart broke for Emily's future. The shower's hot water couldn't wash away the dread that had settled in my bones. I shaved carefully, my hand steady despite the tremor of anxiety that had plagued me for weeks. In a few hours I would walk my daughter down the aisle to marry a man I believed would make her miserable. My modest suit hung pressed and ready on the bedroom door, the same threadbare outfit I'd worn to the restaurant dinner 5 months ago. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. Today, as then, I would play the role of Emily's poor but devoted father, watching from the margins while the Whitmore family's wealth dominated every detail of the celebration. Catherine's wedding photograph sat beside the invitation on my dresser. In it, she glowed with happiness, her hand resting on my young arm as we posed outside the church where Emily would marry today. We'd been so hopeful then, so certain that love conquered all obstacles. I wish you were here, Kat, I whispered to her image. Emily needs her mother today, needs someone who can see through all the expensive flowers and fancy dresses to what really matters. I picked up the simple wedding gift I'd wrapped for Emily, a modest jewelry box containing her grandmother's pearl necklace. Nothing elaborate, nothing that would reveal the fortune I could have spent on her special day. Just a meaningful token from a father who appeared to have little to give but love. The irony cut deep. I could have bought Emily the most spectacular wedding in Illinois history, could have matched the Whitmore's dollar for dollar in demonstrating love through luxury. Instead, I was relegated to the role of grateful poor relation, thankful for their son's generous attention to my unworthy daughter. My coffee tasted bitter as I sat at the kitchen table, watching neighbors begin their Saturday morning routines. The Hendersons were working in their garden, their companionable silence speaking of decades together. That quiet contentment was what marriage should look like, not the performative display of wealth that awaited me at the church. At 10 o'clock, I finally allowed myself to get dressed. The suit felt like a costume now, shabby and uncomfortable after months of private luxury, but it served its purpose, maintained the fiction that had become my prison. Keys to the modest Camry sat on the kitchen counter, next to the keys to my Mercedes and BMW. Even on his daughter's wedding day, William Stone, the billionaire, would remain hidden, while William Stone, the retiree, played his assigned role. The drive to St. Mark's Episcopal Church took 12 minutes through Bloomington's familiar streets. I'd driven this route countless times over the years, to Christmas services with Catherine, to Emily's school plays, to community events that marked the rhythm of ordinary life. Today felt like the end of something precious and the beginning of something I couldn't control. Emily had chosen this church because it was beautiful but not ostentatious, sacred but not intimidating. She'd wanted her wedding to reflect her values: simplicity, meaning over display, love as the central focus rather than wealth. How ironic that Justin's family had turned even this modest venue into a showcase of their financial power. I parked between a Mercedes and a BMW, my Camry looking appropriately humble among the luxury vehicles. Through the church's stained glass windows, I could see elaborate floral arrangements that probably cost more than most people's cars. Taking a deep breath, I checked my appearance one final time in the rearview mirror. The man looking back appeared exactly as he should, proud but overwhelmed by circumstances beyond his control, grateful for his daughter's good fortune even if he couldn't contribute to its grandeur. Emily needed me to be strong today, to smile and celebrate and play the part she believed was my reality. I would not fail her, even as my heart broke for the future I feared awaited her. The church bells began to chime, calling the faithful to witness. I squared my shoulders and walked toward the building that would host what I prayed wouldn't be the biggest mistake of my daughter's life. St. Mark's Episcopal Church had been transformed into something from a luxury magazine spread. White roses and lilies cascaded from every pew end, their perfume almost overwhelming in the afternoon warmth. Crystal chandeliers caught the light streaming through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across marble floors that probably cost more to decorate than I supposedly earned in a year. My Camry looked painfully out of place in the parking lot, filled with Mercedes, BMWs, and Tesla vehicles. I walked through the ornate entrance, conscious of every creak in my worn dress shoes, every loose thread in my outdated suit jacket. "Mr. Stone?" Emily's voice rang out across the church vestibule, bright with nervous excitement. She practically floated toward me in her wedding dress, a vision of ivory silk and Belgian lace that flowed around her like liquid moonlight. "Sweetheart, you look absolutely radiant." I embraced her carefully, mindful of her elaborate hairstyle and the photographer hovering nearby with his expensive camera. "I'm so nervous, Dad. My hands won't stop shaking." She held up trembling fingers adorned with manicured nails and temporary jewelry. "Is that normal?" "Perfectly normal." I took her hands in my weathered ones, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility and love. "Your mother was the same way on our wedding day. Couldn't hold her bouquet steady during the ceremony." Around us, the Whitmore family's guests filled the church with expensive perfume and casual displays of wealth. Women in designer dresses air-kissed acquaintances, while men in custom suits discussed business deals and golf handicaps. I recognized several faces from newspaper society pages, people who moved in circles so far above my supposed station that they looked through me like I was invisible. "There's my beautiful bride," Justin's voice boomed across the vestibule as he approached, resplendent in what I estimated was a $5,000 tuxedo. His smile faltered slightly when he noticed me standing beside Emily. "Hello, Mr. Stone. I see you found something appropriate to wear after all." The insult was delivered with Justin's trademark smile, designed to sound like a compliment to anyone not listening carefully. Emily's cheeks flushed pink. Whether from embarrassment or anger, I couldn't tell. "He looks handsome," she said quietly, her teacher's diplomacy smoothing over the tension. "Of course he does. Nothing wrong with vintage fashion." Justin's laugh carried no warmth as he adjusted his platinum cufflinks. "The photographer wants some family photos before the ceremony starts. Emily, your side first, then mine when my parents arrive." I stood patiently while the photographer arranged us in various poses, conscious of how my modest appearance would contrast with the elaborate setting in every image. Emily glowed with happiness beside me, seemingly unaware of her groom's continued subtle jabs. "Could you step back just a bit, Mr. Stone?" the photographer asked politely. "The lighting is better if you're slightly behind the bride." Even the professional wedding photographer understood the visual hierarchy being established. I was the supporting player in this expensive production, grateful to be included, but careful not to upstage the real stars. The church gradually filled with guests, a clear division between Emily's modest teacher friends and family on the left side, and Justin's wealthy social circle on the right. The contrast was stark. Affordable department store dresses versus designer gowns, rented tuxedos versus custom tailoring, public school teachers versus investment bankers and real estate moguls. "Dad, it's time." Emily squeezed my arm as the wedding march began to play on what sounded like a very expensive sound system. We walked slowly down the aisle together, Emily's train rustling against marble floors, while guests rose in respectful silence. I felt the weight of every gaze, the speculation about this ordinary man who'd somehow produced such a lovely daughter. At the altar, Justin waited with his groomsmen, all young men who looked like they'd stepped from a country club directory. His smile was confident, proprietorial, the expression of someone claiming a prize he'd won through superior breeding and financial advantage. "Who gives this woman to be married to this man?" the minister asked in traditional ceremony language. "I do," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil in my chest. I kissed Emily's forehead gently and placed her hand in Justin's, officially transferring her from one man's protection to another's. Taking my seat in the front pew, I watched as my daughter promised to love, honor, and cherish a man I believed would slowly destroy her spirit through 1,000 small cruelties disguised as generous concern. The ceremony proceeded with expensive elegance, professional musicians, imported flowers, a minister who'd clearly performed many society weddings. Every detail shouted wealth and status, overwhelming Emily's simple desires with Whitmore family tradition. "You may kiss the bride," the minister announced, and Justin claimed Emily with theatrical passion, dipping her backward while the photographer captured the moment for posterity. The recessional music swelled as the new Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore walked back down the aisle, Emily radiant with joy, Justin triumphant in his acquisition. Guests erupted in applause and shower of rose petals that probably cost more than most people's monthly car payment. At the reception entrance, Justin leaned close to me as we waited for the photographer to organize family portraits. "Hope you brought your appetite, Mr. Stone. This dinner costs more per plate than you probably spend on groceries in a month." His whispered words were delivered with a smile for the cameras, but the message was clear. Remember your place in this new family hierarchy. "Actually," a familiar voice called from across the reception area, "we're still waiting for my parents' flight to arrive. They should be here within the hour." Margaret and Robert Whitmore, the power couple behind the family fortune. I'd read about them in business journals for years, though they had no idea their new son-in-law's father-in-law was anything more than Emily's devoted but impoverished parent. Soon, very soon, that would change. "Ladies and gentlemen," the wedding coordinator's voice rang across the banquet hall, like a bell. "Mr. and Mrs. Robert Whitmore have finally arrived from their European flight. Conversations paused mid-sentence as heads turned toward the grand entrance. I felt the shift in the room's energy, the way wealthy people gathered around even wealthier people, like moths to flame. From my modest seat at table 12, I had a perfect view of the doorway. They entered like royalty making a state visit. Margaret Whitmore, resplendent in what I estimated was a $10,000 designer gown, swept into the banquet hall with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. Diamonds glittered at her throat and wrists, real ones, not the cubic zirconia most people wore to weddings. Beside her, Robert Whitmore commanded attention in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. His platinum cufflinks caught the crystal chandelier, light as he surveyed the room with the practiced eye of a man accustomed to evaluating investments. Even from across the hall, I could see the expensive Swiss watch adorning his wrist. "Mom! Dad!" Justin practically bounced across the polished floor, his earlier smugness replaced by excitement at finally showing off for his parents. "You made it! I was starting to worry the plane got delayed again." Margaret embraced her son with the careful precision of someone protecting expensive makeup and elaborate hair. "Darling, we wouldn't miss your special day. The flight from Monaco was dreadful, but we're here now." "How's married life treating you?" Robert clapped Justin on the shoulder, his businessman's smile automatic and practiced. "Incredible, Dad. Emily's perfect. Everything I wanted in a wife." Justin's grin was triumphant as he gestured toward the bridal table where Emily sat radiant in her wedding gown. "Come on, let me introduce you to everyone." I watched this family reunion with the detached interest of someone observing actors in a play. Soon, very soon, the performance would take an unexpected turn. First, though, Justin's voice carried that familiar note of superiority, "let me introduce you to that annoying beggar we're forced to tolerate." Several nearby guests gasped audibly. Even by Justin's standards, the introduction was shockingly crude. A woman at the neighboring table actually dropped her fork, the silver clattering against fine china. Margaret's eyebrows rose in surprise at her son's language, but she followed his gesture toward my table with polite curiosity. Robert looked mildly embarrassed by the public rudeness, glancing around at the other guests who were now staring openly. "Justin," Margaret's voice carried the sharp authority of a woman who'd spent decades in boardrooms. "That's hardly appropriate." "Oh, it's fine, Mom. He's used to it by now. Aren't you, Mr. Stone?" All three Whitmores approached my table, Justin leading with confident steps, while his parents followed with the measured pace of people accustomed to making grand entrances. I remained seated, my weathered hands folded on the white tablecloth, watching Margaret's face as she drew closer. Her businessman's eyes studied me with the automatic assessment wealthy people made of everyone they met, calculating net worth, social position, potential usefulness. But as she stepped within speaking distance, something shifted in her expression. A slight frown creased her perfectly made-up forehead. Her head tilted slightly, like a bird hearing an unusual sound. Those sharp eyes, eyes that had negotiated million-dollar deals and spotted opportunities others missed, narrowed with concentration. "Excuse me," she said, her voice losing its social polish and taking on the focused tone she probably used in business meetings. "But haven't we met before?" The question hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. Around our table, conversations quieted as other guests sensed something significant happening. Justin's confident smile wavered slightly, though he couldn't yet understand why. I met Margaret's gaze steadily, my expression remaining carefully neutral. "I doubt it, ma'am. I'm sure I would remember meeting someone as distinguished as yourself." But Margaret Whitmore hadn't built a business empire by accepting surface answers. Her frown deepened as she studied my features with the intensity of someone solving a particularly challenging puzzle. I could practically see the gears turning in her sharp mind, sifting through faces from countless business meetings, social events, and professional encounters. "No," she said slowly, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "No, I'm certain we've met. Recently, actually. Your face is very familiar." Justin laughed nervously, clearly uncomfortable with his mother's intense focus on the man he'd just publicly insulted. "Mom, trust me, You haven't met him. He's nobody, just Emily's father." Margaret barely heard her son's words. Her business-trained memory was working now, sorting through recent encounters, discarding the irrelevant, focusing on the significant. Her hand moved unconsciously to her throat, fingers touching her diamond necklace as she concentrated. Then her eyes widened. Margaret's hand flew to her mouth, her diamond ring catching the chandelier's light as recognition dawned like sunrise across her face. The color drained from her cheeks beneath perfectly applied makeup. "Oh my goodness," she breathed, her voice barely audible above the gentle clink of crystal glasses and silverware. Aren't you that mysterious billionaire who bought our entire company last year?" The question hit the banquet hall like a thunderclap. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. The string quartet in the corner played on, oblivious to the drama unfolding, their gentle melodies suddenly seeming absurdly inappropriate. I looked directly into Margaret's shocked eyes, my voice calm and steady. "Yes, Margaret, that was me." Justin's crystal wineglass slipped from his fingers like it had been greased. The sound of expensive crystals shattering against marble floor echoed through the suddenly silent hall, shards scattering across polished stone like fallen stars. "What?" Justin's voice cracked like a teenager's. "No, no, that's impossible. You're nobody. You live in that tiny house. You drive that piece of junk car. You wear clothes from thrift stores." "Yes," I finished quietly, rising from my chair with deliberate dignity. "I've heard your observations about my appearance many times over the past few months, Justin." Robert Whitmore stood frozen beside his wife, his businessman's mind racing to process the implications. His son had spent months publicly insulting the mysterious buyer, who now controlled their family's financial future. The color drained from his face as the full magnitude of the disaster became clear. Around us, wedding guests pulled out phones, frantically searching for information about William Stone. The lucky ones with business connections would find articles about the reclusive billionaire who'd made headlines for his anonymous corporate acquisitions. Others would discover social media posts about the mysterious buyer, who'd purchased 3 major Illinois companies in the past 18 months. But you can't be," Justin stammered, his expensive wedding attire suddenly seeming like a costume he'd borrowed. "You're poor. You eat at cheap restaurants. You asked for water instead of wine." "I asked for water because I don't drink alcohol at family dinners," I replied calmly. "And I chose modest restaurants because I wanted to observe your character when you thought no one important was watching." Margaret had recovered her composure with the practiced ease of a veteran negotiator, though her hands still trembled slightly. "Mr. Stone, we had no idea. If you'd known, you would have treated me differently?" I asked, my voice carrying the weight of months of accumulated insults. "But you didn't know, so I learned exactly who you all are when you think there are no consequences." Emily sat at the bridal table, her face a mask of confusion as she tried to process this impossible revelation about her father. Her new husband was having what appeared to be a panic attack, gasping for air like a fish pulled from water. "Dad?" Emily's voice cut through the murmur of amazed guests. "I don't understand. What's happening?" I turned to face my daughter, my heart aching for the confusion and hurt in her eyes. "Emily, sweetheart, I should have told you years ago. I've been hiding my business success because I wanted you to love me for who I am, not what I own." "Business success?" She stood slowly, her wedding dress rustling like autumn leaves. "Dad, what business success?" "I own Stone Industries, darling, and as of last year, I also own the company that employs your husband's family." The banquet hall erupted in whispered conversations as guests shared phone screens, showing search results and news articles about the mysterious William Stone. The society photographer moved closer, his camera clicking rapidly as he captured what would undoubtedly become the most talked about wedding reception in Illinois history. Justin was on his knees now, actually on his knees in his $5,000 tuxedo, his perfectly styled hair disheveled from running his hands through it in panic. "Mr. Stone." "Sir, please, I didn't know. I never would have. Please forgive me." His desperation was pathetic to witness. The confident young man who'd spent months belittling me for my modest appearance now groveled on expensive marble, his voice high with terror. Stand up, Justin, I said quietly. Begging doesn't suit you. He scrambled to his feet, his face flushed red with humiliation and fear. Around us, his parents' wealthy friends watched with the fascination of people witnessing a social execution. I can explain everything. Justin's words tumbled over each other in his haste. I was testing you. Yes, that's it. I wanted to make sure you'd love Emily for herself, not for her family's money. I was protecting her. The lie was so transparent that several guests actually laughed out loud. Even his own mother looked embarrassed by the pathetic attempt at deception. Robert Whitmore stepped forward, his businessman's instincts finally overriding his shock. Mr. Stone, perhaps we could discuss this privately? There may have been some misunderstandings. No misunderstandings, Robert, I replied calmly. Your son showed me exactly who he is when he thought I was powerless to respond. Character isn't something you can fake when you think no one important is watching. Margaret nodded slowly, her sharp mind already calculating the damage to their family's reputation and business relationships. You're absolutely right, Mr. Stone. Justin's behavior has been inexcusable. The truth was finally out, spreading through the banquet hall like wildfire as guests shared the news via text messages and social media posts. The wedding photographer's camera flashed continuously, documenting every moment of this unprecedented social reversal. I looked around the elegant banquet hall one final time, at the expensive flowers and crystal chandeliers that had been purchased with money from the company I now owned. Justice had arrived at last. Justin raised a crystal champagne flute with shaking hands, his designer tuxedo wrinkled from his desperate genuflection moments before. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice cracked with panic, let's have a toast to the most wonderful father-in-law a man could ask for. The attempt at salvage was so pathetic that even some of his own family friends winced. Several guests actually turned away, unable to watch this public humiliation of someone they'd once respected. Please, Mr. Stone. Justin's champagne sloshed over the rim of his glass as his hands trembled. I was just joking all those times. You knew I was joking, right? Just good-natured family teasing. I remained standing beside my modest chair, unchanged by the revelation of my true identity. My worn suit, my weathered hands, my humble appearance, all exactly as they'd been when Justin thought I was powerless. No, Justin, I said quietly, my voice carrying easily through the silent banquet hall. You showed me your true character. When you believed there were no consequences, you revealed who you really are. But I didn't mean... You called me an annoying beggar not 10 minutes ago, I interrupted. In front of your parents, in front of Emily, in front of 200 wedding guests. That wasn't a joke. That was your honest assessment of someone you considered beneath you. Emily stood frozen at the bridal table, her beautiful wedding dress seeming to weigh her down like armor that no longer fit. Tears gathered in her eyes as she looked between her father and her new husband. Dad, why didn't you tell me? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Because I wanted you to choose love over money, sweetheart. I wanted you to marry someone who would treasure you for your kindness, your intelligence, your beautiful heart. Not someone who saw you as a prize to be won. Margaret Whitmore had regained her composure, her businesswoman's mask sliding back into place. Mr. Stone, on behalf of our family, I sincerely apologize for Justin's behavior. It's been inexcusable. Apologize to yourselves, I replied. You raised him to believe that wealth makes him superior to others. Tonight, he learned that assumption can be dangerous. Justin dropped to his knees again, this time clutching at my worn pants leg like a drowning man grasping for driftwood. Please, I'll do anything. I'll change. I swear I'll be different. You're 30 years old, Justin. If you haven't learned respect and humility by now, you never will. I gently but firmly removed his grasping hands. Character isn't something you put on like an expensive suit. It's who you are when you think no one's watching. The banquet hall had become a theater, with 200 guests witnessing the most dramatic reversal of fortune they'd ever seen. Phone cameras captured every moment as Justin Whitmore, heir to a real estate empire, groveled before the modest man he'd spent months insulting. Emily, I said, turning to face my daughter across the polished marble floor, you're an adult. You've made your choice, and I respect that. But I won't tolerate disrespect. regardless of family relationships. Dad, please don't leave. Emily took a hesitant step forward, her train rustling behind her. We can work this out. Justin will apologize properly, won't you, Justin? Her new husband nodded frantically from his position on the floor. Yes, yes, I'll do whatever you want. Please, just give me another chance. I looked down at Justin's desperate face, seeing nothing there but fear of consequences rather than genuine remorse. He wasn't sorry for his cruelty. He was sorry he'd been caught being cruel to someone with power. Some mistakes can't be undone with apologies, I said quietly. You spent months showing me who you really are, Justin. Money doesn't change character, it reveals it. Walking slowly toward the banquet hall's exit, I felt the weight of 200 gazes following my progress. The string quartet had stopped playing, their instruments silent, as everyone watched this unprecedented drama unfold. Mr. Stone, wait! Robert Whitmore called out, his business instincts overriding his embarrassment. Surely we can discuss this like reasonable men. There are contracts to consider, business relationships. The contracts will be honored, I replied without turning around. I've never broken a business agreement, and I won't start now. But I won't pretend to respect people who've shown me their true nature. Behind me, Justin's voice rose to a wail. You can't do this. Emily, tell him he can't do this. We're family now. I paused at the ballroom's threshold, my hand resting on the ornate doorframe. The cool evening air drifted in from the corridor, carrying the scent of freedom from pretense. Emily, I called back to my daughter, you know where I live. You know I love you. But I won't watch my child be married to someone who thinks cruelty is acceptable entertainment. The grand doors closed behind me with a soft whisper, cutting off the sound of Justin's continued pleas and the excited chatter of wedding guests who'd just witnessed the most dramatic social reversal of their lives. Outside, the September evening was crisp and clear. Stars sparkled overhead like scattered diamonds, indifferent to the human drama that had just unfolded beneath them. My modest Camry waited in the parking lot among the luxury vehicles, looking exactly as humble and unremarkable as when I'd arrived. I climbed into the worn driver's seat and sat quietly for a moment, feeling the weight of decades of secrecy lifting from my shoulders. No more pretending to be poor. No more accepting insults from spoiled children who confused wealth with worth. The engine turned over with its familiar, reliable rumble. As I drove away from the wedding reception, I caught a glimpse in my rearview mirror of the elegant banquet hall, glowing with warm light, where my daughter was learning that her father had been someone entirely different than she'd believed, and her new husband was discovering that actions have consequences. Justice, I reflected, sometimes arrives fashionably late to the party. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.